Right. Excellent. We are live. Hello and happy Saturday for those of you who are going to be joining in live or watching this after the fact. Today, I know this is a bit impromptu, but I've had a window and decided I wanted to expand a bit on the series that I have been working on as of late. Some of you may know that I have been breaking down Neville Goddard's 5 lessons, each of his 5 lessons, which are 1 through 5. Get link down below if you have not seen them yet. But there is a bonus section to Neville's 5 lessons, and that is a Q&A at the end of it, from answering questions from the people in his audience that night, or those followers. I'm not sure if he did the 5 lessons live. I believe he did, but these are the questions that were brought up from his followers that he answered, and I think it's really important to go over them because it does answer a lot of the common questions that we might have. There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom in there. So I figure, why not share? You might also notice some cats running around in the background. They're joining today. They decided to hang out in the office. So enjoy that ruckus in the background. But I'm going to be going back and forth between screen sharing and kind of switching off, because I will be reading over and then making notes and highlighting some important takeaways from this. Because like I said, there are really some good questions that are brought up, and the way that Neville answers them, of course, are incredibly important to take note. So definitely be sure to grab a piece of paper, and I'll try not to get too distracted. Grab a piece of paper and a pen if you like to take notes, and go ahead and jump on in. I might need to scroll up here. So I believe there's 35 questions that were asked in total. Oh my goodness, here we go. So Neville Goddard's 5 lessons, the last part, bonus part, the Q&A. The first question, what is the meaning of the insignia on your covers? It is an eye imposed upon a heart, which, in turn, is imposed upon a tree laden with fruit, meaning that what you are conscious of and accept as true, you are going to realize. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Question number 2. I would like to be married, but have not found the right man. How do I imagine a husband? Neville says, forever in love with ideals, it is the ideal state that captures the mind. Do not confide the state of marriage to a certain man, but a full, rich, and overflowing life. You desire to experience the joy of marriage. Do not modify your dream, but enhance it by making it lovelier. Then condense your desire into a single sensation or act, which implies its fulfillment. In this Western world, a woman wears a wedding ring on the 3rd finger of her left hand. Motherhood need not imply marriage. Intimacy need not imply marriage, but a wedding ring does. Relax in a comfortable armchair or lie flat on your back and induce a state akin to sleep. Then assume the feeling of being married. Imagine a wedding band on your finger. Touch it. Turn it around the finger. Pull it off over the knuckle. Keep the action going until the ring has the distinctness and feeling of reality. Become so lost in the feeling, the ring on your finger, that when you open your eyes, you'll be surprised that it is not there. If you are a man who does not wear a ring, you could assume greater responsibility. How would you feel if you had a wife to care for? Assume the feeling of being a happily married man right now. So, really important thing I want to note there. To be abundantly clear, there's this ongoing debate back and forth on whether or not Neville Goddard supported the idea of manifesting a specific person. And to be clear, he was supportive of manifesting anything. That was his entire point. There are no limitations to what we are able to see outpictured or what we can experience. The reason he said here to not confine the state of marriage to a certain man, but to a full, rich, and overflowing life is because he's talking about you want to capture the mood. You want to capture the feeling of it. Now, if you do have somebody specific in mind, that is something you can absolutely bring into the imaginal act, or just have that knowing as you are imagining. But I thought it's really important here that he says focus on what would be implied. If you are now married, what would be something that implies you are married? It not necessarily motherhood, because that does not instinctively imply marriage. Intimacy does not imply marriage specifically, but wearing a wedding ring does. So he's saying, make sure that whatever you are imagining implies, and then bring that into your imagination and really get the distinctness of it. In the case of the wedding ring, he said, play with it, touch it, fiddle with it, and really get the tone there of a real wedding ring. So just a few important things there. Really, the emphasis is on how would it feel, and then something that implies that it already is so. Let's continue. Question: what must I do to inspire creative thoughts such as those needed for writing? Neville answers, what must you do? Assume the story has already been written and accepted by a great publishing house. Reduce the idea of being a writer to the sensation of satisfaction. Repeat the phrase, isn't it wonderful? Or thank you, thank you, thank you, over and over again until you feel successful. Or imagine a friend congratulating you. There are unnumbered ways of implying success, but always go to the end. Your acceptance of the end wills its fulfillment. Do not think about getting in the mood to write, but live and act as though you are now the author you desire to be. Assume you have the talent for writing. Think of the pattern you want displayed on the outside. If you write a book and no one is willing to buy it, there is no satisfaction. Act as though people are hungry for your work. Live as though you cannot produce stories or books fast enough to meet the demand. Persist in this assumption, and all that is necessary to achieve your goal will quickly burst into bloom, and you will express it. So again, important to note that he really emphasizes not getting stuck up in the how. Like in this case, how do I inspire writing? How do I get myself into, inspiration to write more? And Neville said, imagine the book's already published. Don't get caught up about thinking how you need to get into the mood to write. Don't get yourself caught up in the details of how am I going to get this out there. Imagine it's already out there. This is a really subtle and sneaky way that we may be keeping ourselves stuck, because to the human ego, to the human thinking, oh my God, to the human thinking mind, we very much want to know how, like what are the things and the action steps I need to take. So again, much emphasis on see yourself as already having success. Not only did you write the book already, but it's already a New York Times bestseller. There's, everyone's talking about it. People are reaching out, wanting to make a movie from it. This is where we're going to go wild. Question: how do I imagine larger audiences for my talks? Neville answers, I can answer you best by sharing the technique used by a very able teacher I know. When this man first came to this country, he began speaking in a small hall in New York City. Although only 50 or 60 people attended his Sunday morning meeting, and they sat in front, this teacher would stand at the podium and imagine a vast audience. Then he would say to the empty space, can you hear me back there? Today, this man is speaking in Carnegie Hall in New York City to approximately 2,500 people every Sunday morning and Wednesday evening. He wanted to speak to crowds. He was not modest. He did not try to fool himself, but built a crowd in his own consciousness. And crowds come. Stand before a large audience. Address this audience in your imagination. Feel you are on that stage, and your feeling will provide the means. Probably see the pattern here. Question: is it possible to imagine several things and find my imaginal act to a single thought? During the course of the day, I may imagine many, but instead of imagining lots of small things, I would suggest that you imagine something so big it includes all the little things. Instead of imagining wealth, health, and friends, imagine being ecstatic. You could not be ecstatic and be in pain. You could not be ecstatic and be threatened with a disposition notice. You could not be ecstatic if you were not enjoying a full measure of friendship and love. What would the feeling be like? Were you ecstatic without knowing what had happened to produce your ecstasy? Reduce the idea of ecstasy to the single sensation. Isn't it wonderful? Do not allow the conscious reasoning mind to ask why, because if it does, it will start to look for visible causes, and then the sensation will be lost. Rather, repeat over and over again, isn't it wonderful? Suspend judgment as to what is wonderful. Catch the one sensation of the wonder of it all, and things will happen to bear witness to the truth of this sensation. And I promise you, it will include all the little things. So important to note, Neville was really big on the lullaby method, or isn't it wonderful? This was, he mentions it frequently. Like, just reduce the reduce the feeling, condense the feeling, and that will imply all of the smaller things or all of the multiple things to go with that. Question: how often should I perform the imaginal act? A few days or several weeks? Neville answers, in the book of Genesis, the story is told of Jacob wrestling with an angel. The story gives us the clue we are looking for, that when satisfaction is reached, impotence follows. When the feeling of reality is yours, for the moment at least, you are mentally impotent. The desire to repeat the act of prayer is lost, having been replaced by the feeling of accomplishment. You cannot persist in wanting what you already have. If you assume you are what you desire to be to the point of ecstasy, you no longer want it. Your imaginal act is as much a creative act as a physical one, wherein man halts, shrinks, and is blessed. For as man creates his own likeness, so does your imaginal act transform itself into the likeness of your assumption. If, however, you do not reach the point of satisfaction, repeat the action over and over again until you feel as though you touched it and virtue went out of you. All right, so that's an important one because I get this question all the time. How often should we be doing these techniques? How often should we be doing our sats or whatever the technique, affirmations? How long? Couple days, couple weeks? Well, until we are satisfied, until that feeling of satisfaction is reached in that moment when you are imagining it. So once you reach that place of satisfaction, once you have that feeling in the imaginal act, you can drop it. It's done. And he says, for the moment, you're going to be mentally impotent, which means you're not going to be able to continue to want something that you feel you already have. So once you reach that feeling state of satisfaction or success, accomplished, then you're done. That's all there is to it. He says if you don't reach that point, then we repeat the act or the technique until we do, until we reach that feeling. When satisfaction is reached, that impotence follows. And then we're no longer going to feel moved to continue to imagine because it's going to feel done. Let's continue. Question: I've been taught not to ask for earthly things, only for spiritual growth. Yet money and things are what I need. Neville answers, You must be honest with yourself. All through scripture, the question is asked, what do you want of me? Some wanted to see, others to eat, and still others wanted to be made straight, or that my child live. Your dimensionally larger self speaks to you through the language of desire. Do not deceive yourself. Knowing what you want, claim you already have it. For it is your Father's good pleasure to give it to you, and remember, what you desire, that you have. So important to note, number one, we have to be honest with ourselves. Have to be honest with ourselves. Getting clear on what we want, getting clear on that desire. Do not deceive yourself, because you cannot deceive yourself. Not actually. Knowing what you want, claim you already have it. Question: when you have as assumed your desire, do you keep in mind the ever presence of this greater one protecting and giving you your assumption? Neville answers, the acceptance of the end wills the means. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and your dimensionally greater self will determine the means. When you appropriate a state as though you had it, the activity of the day will divert your mind from all anxious thoughts so that you do not look for signs. Sorry. You do not have to carry the feeling that some presence is going to do it for you. Rather, you know it is already done. Knowing it is already a fact, walk as though it were, and things will happen to make it so. You do not have to be concerned about some presence doing anything for you. The deeper, dimensionally greater you has already done it. All you do is move to the place where you encounter it. Remember the story of the man who left the master and was on his way home when he met his servant, who said, "Your son lives." And when he asked at what hour it was done, the servant replied, "The 7th hour." The self-same hour that he assumed his desire, it was done for him. For it was at the 7th hour that the master said, "Your son lives." Your desire is already granted. Walk as though it were, and although time beats slowly in this dimension of your being, in the 3D, it will nevertheless bring you confirmation of your assumption. I ask you not to be impatient, though. If there is one thing you really have need of, it is patience. Let's break that one down. That one sounds important. So, because we all have been here. We all have been through this one. When we have assumed our desire, do we keep in mind the presence of the greater one protecting? And basically what it means is, when we have assumed it, do we go looking for it? Do we keep in mind how it's going to come about? And Neville says no. Basically, the acceptance of the end wills the means. You do not have to carry the feeling that some presence is going to bring it to you. He mentions also very clearly, we do not look for signs, as tempting as that might be. We do not look for 3D confirmation. It is instead the feeling of already being so. Because you have experienced the feeling of having it in imagination, it is done for you. It is done for you. And you will be naturally moved. The series of events that follows, you're not going to be conscious of it. You're not going to know how that comes about, when it comes about, but instead that the means have already been made for you. As soon as you have accepted that desire, it is yours. He also made it a point to note that time beats slowly in this 3D world. So though you may not see it with your physical eyes, don't let that sway you. We do not have to concern ourselves with anything other than walk in that faith. Walk as though it is already done for you, despite what it shows out here. Let's continue. Question: Isn't there a law that says you cannot get something for nothing? Must we not earn what we desire? Neville answers, creation is finished. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. The parable of the prodigal son is your answer. In spite of man's waste, when he comes to his senses and remembers who he is, he feeds on the fattened calf of abundance and wears the robe and ring of authority. There is nothing to earn. Creation was finished in the foundation of time. You, as man, are God made visible for the purpose of displaying what is, not what is to be. Do not think you must work out your salvation by the sweat of your brow. It is not 4 months until they harvest. The fields are already white, simply thrust in the sickle. So, very simply, going back to creation is finished, and that we don't have to work hard or labor in effort to get this thing that we want, whatever that might be. It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And that's a quote, actually, that is a verse would probably serve well to remember. There's nothing to earn as far as like needing to exchange or, prove your worthiness to something, work for something, none of that. You do not think you must work out your salvation by the sweat of your brow. It is not 4 months until the harvest. The fields are already white, simply thrust in the sickle. So he's meaning it's already done now. There is no working hard and waiting for it. It's done now. Question: does not the thought that creation is finished rob one of his initiative? Neville answers, if you observe an event before it occurs, then the occurring event must be predetermined from the point of view of being awake in this three-dimensional world. Yet, you do not have to encounter what you observe. You can, by changing your self-concept, interfere with your future and mold it in harmony with your changed concept of self. So, what he's saying here is that nothing is predetermined. Nothing's predetermined for you. Does the thought creation is finished like hinder someone of his initiative or take away from his fate? The question is basically, doesn't that rob somebody of his fate or destiny if creation is finished? And Neville's saying here that there is no fate or destiny. If you can observe an event before it occurs, then the occurring event must be predetermined from the point of view of being awake in this three-dimensional world. So you can assume that something is going to be, and it will be, but you don't have to encounter it again and again. If you change your self-concept, you will change your future, essentially, because your future will mold and reshape itself based on your conception of self. Basically, when you change your self-concept, everything changes. Hey now, babies. It's the terrible twins. So really, really, really important to remember. Just because something is a certain way in this 3D right now does not mean you have to continue to accept that that is the premise and that is what is going to continue to happen. Question: does not this ability to change the future deny that creation is finished? Neville answers, no. You, by changing your concept of self, change your relationship to things. If you rearrange the words of a play to write a different one, you have not created new words, but simply had the joy of rearranging them. Your concept of self determines the order of events you encounter. They are in the foundation of the world, but not their order of arrangement. So this is, he has a brilliant way of words sometimes. Again, we're noticing the theme here. This is all about the change of yourself. There is no one to change but self. If you rearrange the words of a play to write a different one, you have not created new words. You've just rearranged them. So this is actually a really important analogy because a lot of times we get caught up in the idea that we need to change the 3D, that we need to even create this new world. Neville's saying you're just selecting something different. You're just rearranging what already exists. So a much better way to look at it. Question: why should one who works hard in metaphysics always seem to lack? Neville answers, because he has not really applied metaphysics. I am not speaking of a mamby-pamby approach to life, but a daily application of the law of consciousness. When you appropriate your good, there is no need for man or state to act as a medium through which your good will come. Living in a world of men, money is needed in everyday life. If I invite you to lunch tomorrow, I must pick up the check. When I leave the hotel, I must pay the bill. In order to take the train back to New York City, my railway fare must be paid. I need money and it has to be there. I am not going to say, God knows best and he knows I need money. Rather, I will appropriate the money as though it were. We must live boldly. We must go through life as though we possessed what we want to possess. Do not think that because you helped another, someone outside of you saw your good works and will give you something to ease your burden. There is no one to do it for you. You, yourself, must go boldly in appropriating what your Father has already given to you. All right, I kind of want to touch on this one really quick. Neville can also be very straightforward, very blunt. He's not speaking of a mamby-pamby approach to life, but a daily application of the law of consciousness. So this isn't about, oh, God knows best and, being whimsical and wishful. This is about appropriating the feeling, the state of already having money. In this example, he talks about in this 3D world, we need money, exchange for goods and services. So if I want to be able to continue to pay for things, I want to assume the feeling of abundance. I want to assume that whatever debts or bills or things need to be paid, that they are paid. It's all stemming from you, and it's us appropriating the state. But we need to do it. We cannot just expect somebody to do it for us or look to any kind of outside circumstance to make it so. We have to live boldly and assume as though we possess what we desire to possess. No two ways around it. Let's continue. Question: can an uneducated person educate himself by assuming the feeling of being educated? Neville answers, yes. An aroused interest is awarded information from every side. You must sincerely desire to be well schooled. The desire to be well read, followed by the assumption that you are, makes you selective in your reading. As you progress in your education, you automatically become more selective, more discriminating in all that you do. So, once again, you can assume yourself into being anything, and then you will be naturally moved to follow that assumption. Question: my husband and I are taking the class together. Should we discuss our desires with each other? Neville answers, there are two spiritual sayings which permeate the Bible. One is, go tell no man. And the other is, I have told you before it comes to pass that when it does come to pass, you may believe. It takes spiritual boldness to tell another that your desire is fulfilled before it is seen on the outside. If you do not have that kind of boldness, then you had better keep quiet. I personally enjoy telling my plans to my wife because we both get such a thrill when they come into being. The first person a man wants to prove this law to is his wife. It is said that Muhammad is everlastingly great because his first disciple was his wife. So Should we talk about our manifestation, our desires to our friends, family? And what Neville's saying here is if you can assume no matter what, then yes, you can feel free to talk about it with people if you feel like they're going to be encouraging or supportive, or if you have the boldness to not be shaken if they start doubting. If you tell somebody your desires and your aim to manifest something and they're trying to fill your head with doubt, are you going to be moved by that? If you find that you're easily moved, then don't say anything. Excuse me. Question. Should my husband and I work on the same project or on separate ones? Neville answers, that is entirely up to you. My wife and I have different interests, yet we have much in common. Do you recall the story I told of our return to the United States this spring? I felt it was my duty as a husband to get passage back to America, so I appropriated that to myself. I feel there are certain things that are on my wife's side of the contract, such as maintaining a clean, lovely home and finding the appropriate school for our daughter, so she takes care of those. Quite often, my wife will ask me to imagine for her, as though she has greater faith in my ability to do it than in her own. That flatters me, because every man worthy of the name wants to feel that his family has faith in him. But I see nothing wrong in the communion between two who love one another. So that's sweet. Yeah. Basically, if you and your partner want to work on the same things and aspire toward the same goals, absolutely. Question. I would think that if you get too much into the sleepy state, there would be a lack of feeling. Neville answers, when I speak of feeling, I do not mean emotion, but acceptance of the fact that the desire is fulfilled. Feeling grateful, fulfilled, or thankful. It is easy to say, thank you, isn't it wonderful? Or it is finished. When you get into the state of thankfulness, you can either awaken knowing it is done, or fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That's an important one to remember. It's not emotion, but acceptance of the fact that it is done. So once you reach that place of naturalness, it is done. Question, is love a product of your own consciousness? Neville answers, all things exist in your consciousness, be they love or hate. Nothing comes from without. The hills to which you look for help are those of an inner range. Your feelings of love, hate, or indifference all spring from your own consciousness. Ooh, you are infinitely greater than you could ever conceive yourself to be. Never in eternity will you reach the ultimate you. That is how wonderful you are. Love is not a product of you. You are love, for that is what God is, and God's name is I am. The very name you call yourself before you make the claim as to the state you are now in. That last sentence was especially important. I mean, the whole thing is important. Like, love is not a product of you, but you are love, because that is what God is. God's name is I am, the very name you call yourself before you make the claim as to the state you are now in. So we always have to be mindful of what we are claiming as the state we are in. I am loved. I am prioritized. I am unhappy. I am miserable. I am broke. I am wealthy. But it all starts with I am, and then the state that follows. Excuse me. Question. Suppose my wants cannot be materialized for 6 months to a year. Do I wait to imagine them? Neville answers, when the desire is upon you, that is the time to accept your wish in its fullness. Perhaps there are reasons why the urge is given you at this time. Your three-dimensional being may think it cannot be now, but your fourth-dimensional mind knows it already is. So the desire should be accepted by you as a physical fact now. Suppose you want to build a house. The urge to have it is now, but it is going to take time for the trees to grow and the carpenter to build the house. Although the urge seems big, do not wait to adjust it. Claim possession now and let it objectify itself in its own strange way. Do not say it will take 6 months or a year. The minute the desire comes upon you, assume it is already a fact. You and you alone, given your desire, a time interval, and time is relative when it comes to this world. You do not wait for anything to come to pass. Accept it now as though it were, and see what happens. When you have a desire, the deeper you, who men call God, is speaking. He urges you, through the language of desire, to accept that which is not that which is to be. Desire is simply his communion with you, telling you that your desire is yours now. Your acceptance of this fact is provided by your complete adjustment to it as though it were true. So I definitely want to take note on this one because of our human conditioning to time. It's really easy for us to get stuck in, well, what if it's going to take 6 months or a year or whatever, several weeks? Do I wait to imagine then? What do I do? And Neville is very straightforward that you do not wait to imagine based on the 3D circumstances. As soon as you have a desire for something, you assume that it is done. You feel into that as though it was done. We do not need to wait for anything. It may look in the 3D like things need to happen first. There may seem to be conditions, but your fourth dimensional mind, your imagination, knows it already is. So the desire should be accepted by you as a physical fact now. This is where a lot of people struggle. Future thinking versus having it now. Neville saying, experience it now in here. Because in your imagination, it already is so. In the 3D, it isn't, but in here, it is. So that's what we're always doing. That's why he often quotes, do not wait 4 months until the harvest. Harvest it now. All right, let's continue. Question, why do some of us die young? Neville answers, our lives are not, in retrospect, measured by years, but by the contents of those years. And he talks about this a little bit more in one of the other questions. Death is a topic that he does bring up and answers here. Question, what would you consider a full life? Neville answers, a variety of experiences. The more varied they are, the richer is your life. At death, you function in a dimensionally larger world and play your part on a keyboard made up of a lifetime of human experiences. Therefore, the more varied your experiences, the finer is your instrument and the richer is your life. Question, what about a child who dies at birth? Neville answers, the child who is born lives forever, as nothing dies. It may appear that the child who dies at birth has no keyboard of human experience, but, as a poet once said, he drew a circle that shut me out. Infidel, scoundrel, a thing to flout. But my cat. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. The loved one has access to the sensory experience of the lover. God is love. Therefore, ultimately everyone has an instrument, the keyboard of which is the sensory impressions of all men. The child who was born lives forever as nothing dies. Nothing dies. If creation is finished, it couldn't be so. Come on, baby. All right, stay there. Question, what is your technique of prayer? Neville answers, it starts with desire, for desire is the mainspring of action. You must know and define your objective, then visualize your physical body and experience in your imagination the action which implies its fulfillment. Repeat this act over and over until it has the vividness and feeling of reality. Or condense your desire into a single phrase that implies fulfillment, such as, thank you, Father, isn't it wonderful? Or it is finished. Repeat that condensed phrase or action in your imagination over and over again. Then either awaken from that state or slip off into the deep, into sleep. It does not matter, for the act is done when you completely accept it as being finished in that sleepy, drowsy state. Sorry, my cat. Hang on one sec, guys. You're being naughty. You're being naughty. Oh my God. There you go, baby. You be good? So, again, just outlining prayer for those who may not have watched parts 1 through 5 yet. When Neville talks about prayer, he talks about imagining the wish fulfilled. It's essentially the same thing. So he's just outlining and describing how he personally prays or imagines that wish fulfilled. Question: two people want the same position. One has it. The other had it and now wants it back. Neville answers, your father, the dimensionally greater you. Oh my God, this cat. I'm going to put you back outside. Your father, the dimensionally greater you, or the higher self, has ways and means you know not of. Accept his wisdom. Feel your desire is fulfilled. Then allow your father to give it to you. The present one may be promoted to a higher position, or marry a man of great wealth and give up her job. She may come into a great deal of money, or choose to move to another state. Oh, many people say that they want to work, but I question that seriously. They want security and conditioned security on a job. But I really do not think the average girl truly wants to get up in the morning and go to work. Got to remember Neville was a product of his time. It's important to note that. But there are some things here that I really want to point out that are important. Because another question that we may come up with is, if two people want the same thing, like, how does that work? If I desire something that somebody else does that mean that, one of us has to sacrifice or go without? And Neville does a really good job answering that the Father or your higher self has ways and means you know not of. Accept that wisdom. So basically, just see yourself in the position, see yourself in that desire, whatever that looks like for you. Don't consider the obstacles or perceived obstacles or competition or whatever the case may be. He gave on to give examples of how the ways in which it could change. In this example, where you want a position and this other person wants the position, they may be promoted to another one. They may marry somebody rich and retire. They might move to another state. We're not going to know the how, but see yourself as already having what you want. So in this example, he's saying, see yourself in that position. And he also, the last thing I thought it was important to note was when he says, many people say they want to work, but I question that seriously. They want security and conditioned security on a job. So what he means by that is, it's not that we want to, I do believe that there are people that genuinely enjoy their job and may love going to work, but arguably for most people, it's not that they want a job, they want the feeling of security. And they condition security on having a job. And this is something that often comes with manifesting wealth and abundance. We tend to have so many conditions around that by saying, I need to have a certain job or work a certain number of hours in order to make more money. We don't need to condition any of that, because what we truly desire is the feeling of security, the feeling of freedom, of the relief of knowing that we can always pay our bills. That's what we truly desire. And so we don't have to condition it on getting this certain job or having this certain career or whatever the case may be. Just see yourself however you want to feel and experience, and really let yourself feel into that. But let's continue. I've got a cat in my lap. She's so warm. Question: what is the cause of disease and pain? Neville answers: the physical body is an emotional filter. Many human ailments, hitherto considered purely physical, are now recognized as rooted in emotional disturbances. Pain comes from lack of relaxation. When you sleep, there is no pain. If you are under an anesthetic, there is no pain because you are relaxed, as it were. If you have pain, it is because you are tense and trying to force something. You cannot force an idea into embodiment. I'm going to highlight this. You cannot force an idea into embodiment. You simply appropriate it. It is attention minus effort. Only practice will bring you to that point where you can be attentive and still be relaxed. So I actually just came out with a video yesterday where I touch on this. And this is a topic that I touch on a lot. For those of you who do watch my channel, you probably hear me say this all the time because it's true. If we are in pain or something is wrong, it's because we are tense and trying to force something. We cannot force an idea into embodiment. We cannot, will it into being. We have to practice just being relaxed while still being attentive. And it is a practice. It is a practice. Attention is tension toward an end, and relaxation is just the opposite. Here are two completely opposite ideas that you must blend until you learn through practice how to be attentive but not tense. The word contention means intention minus effort. In the state of contention, you are held by the idea without tension. Highlight that part. That part is important. Read it over and over again. Question: no matter how much I try to be happy, underneath I have a melancholy feeling of being left out. Why is that? Neville answers: because you feel you are not wanted. Were I you, I would assume I am wanted. You know the technique. The assumption that you are wanted may seem false when first assumed. But if you feel wanted and respected and persist in that assumption, you will be amazed how others will seek you out. They will begin to see qualities in you they had never seen before. I promise you, if you will but assume you are wanted, you will be. Question: if security came to me through the death of a loved one, did I bring about that death? Answer: do not think for 1 second that you brought about a death by assuming security. The greater you is not going to injure anyone. It sees all, and, knowing the length of life of all, it can inspire the other to give you that which can fulfill your assumption. You did not kill the person who named you in his will. If, a few days after you complete acceptance of the idea of security, Uncle John made his exit from his three-dimensional plane and left you his estate, it is only because it was time for Uncle John to go. He did not die 1 second before his time, however. The greater you saw the lifespan of John and used him as the way to bring about the fulfillment of your feeling of security. The acceptance of the end wills the means toward the fulfillment of that end. Do not be concerned with anything save the end. Always bear in mind that the responsibility to make it so is completely removed from your shoulders. It is yours because you accept it is so. This is a topic that does get brought up quite a bit. Like, if something happens, a death to the loved one, did we bring about that? And Neville's saying here, No, don't entertain that for 1 second. If by assuming something lovely, it appears like something bad happened to another, it's not that you did something to this person. I am almost finished with that series on death because it is something that did wind up becoming a series. I tried to make it in one video. There was just too much to condense into one video. But what he talks about, your highest self, the greater you, is, able to see, all things. Basically, like that's the higher self is always able to bring about the ways and means, bring about the different states, like move you through the states in order to bring about that means. So this was the way that things unfolded in the way that it did, but you did not cause it. And also, no one can actually die. This is a topic I could talk for a while on the topic of death because it is one that is obviously touched by all. It's one that is very significant to everybody. And I will be coming out with a video talking more about that. But basically, do not blame yourself. Do not pit it on yourself. Right? All you are required to do here is accept that it is done for you. The acceptance of the end wills the means. And for good measure, always make sure that you are, assuming the greatest and best for all, with the greatest and best intentions for all. Always apply the golden rule. Always apply the golden rule. Question: I have more than one objective. Would it be ineffective to concentrate on different objectives at different periods of concentration? Neville answers: I like to take one consuming ambition, restricted to a single short phrase, or act that implies fulfillment. But I do not limit my ambition. I only know that my real objective will include all the little ones. So, Neville was a huge fan of Isn't It Wonderful? Just condensing it all into a feeling. And then all of the multiple things will come from that feeling. But you could also concentrate on different objectives if that is what you prefer. That's just my 2 cents. Question: I find it difficult to change my self-concept. Why is that? Neville answers: because your desire to change has not been aroused. If you would fall in love with what you really want to be, you would become it. It takes an intense hunger to bring about a transformation of self. If you would become as thirsty for perfection as a little heart is for water, that it braves the anger of the tiger in the forest, you would become perfect. So in this point, he's saying you have to be so passionate for that change that it eclipses the ego desire to stay the same. To the ego, there is a huge resistance to change. That is, humans have this on a subconscious level. We're naturally resistant to the idea of change. It is a lot safer to stick with the familiar same old, same old. So what Neville's saying here is that, in order to change your self-concept, you have to fall in love with what you really want to be more so than, the convenience and ease of staying the same. It really takes a burning passion. Like, you have to be so thoroughly done with that old state of being. And I mean, done with it. Question: I am contemplating a business venture. It means a great deal to me, but I cannot imagine how it can come into being. Neville answers: you are relieved of that responsibility. You do not have to make it a reality. It already is. Although your concept of self seems so far removed from the venture you now contemplate, it exists now as a reality within you, in your imagination. Ask yourself how it would feel and what you would be doing if your business venture were a great success. Become identified with that character and feeling, and you will be amazed how quickly you will realize your dream. The only sacrifice you are called upon to make is to give up your present concept of self and appropriate the desire you want to express. So notice the theme here. Notice there's a theme here. We are relieved of the responsibility of making it so, even if we have no clue how it could happen. Not our job. Not our circus, not our job. You do not have to make it a reality because it already is. One second. Question. As a metaphysical student, I have been taught to believe that race beliefs and universal assumptions affect me. Do you mean that only to the degree I give these universal beliefs power over me? Am I influenced by them? Neville answers, yes. It is only your individual viewpoint, as your world is forever bearing witness to your present concept of self. If someone offends you, change your self-concept. That is the only way others change. Tonight's paper may read by any 6 people in this room, and no 2 will interpret the same story in the same way. One will be elated, the other depressed, another indifferent, and so on. Yet it is the same story. Universal assumptions, race beliefs, call them what you will, they are not important to you. What is important is your concept, not of another, but of yourself. For the concept you hold of yourself determines the concept you hold of others. Leave others alone. What are they to you? Follow your desires. The law is always in operation, always absolute. Your consciousness is the rock upon which all structures rest. Watch what you are aware of. You need not concern yourself with others, because you are sustained by the absoluteness of this law. No man comes to you of his own accord, be he good, bad, or indifferent. He did not choose you. You chose him. He was drawn to you because of what you are. You cannot destroy the state another represents through force. Rather, leave him alone. What is he to you? Rise to a higher level of consciousness, and you will find a new world awaiting you. And as you sanctify yourself, others are sanctified. So, regardless of our universal assumptions, our societal conditioning, none of that is ultimately important. What is important here is our concept of self, because that is the lens that we see everything through. That determines our perception. So change that, everything changes. Question, who wrote the Bible? The Bible was written by intelligent men who used solar and phallic myths to reveal psychological truths. But we have mistaken for their allegory for history, and, therefore, have failed to see their true message. It is strange, but when the Bible was launched upon the world, and acceptance seemed to be in sight, the great Alexandria Library was burnt to the ground, leaving no record as to how the Bible came into being. Few people can read other languages, so they cannot compare their beliefs with others. Our churches do not encourage us to compare. How many of the millions who accept the Bible as fact ever question it? Believing it is the Word of God, they blindly accept the words and thus lose the essence they contain. Having accepted the vehicle, they do not understand what the vehicle conveys. Question, do you use Apocrypha? Apocrypha? Neville says, not in my teachings. I have several volumes of them at home. They are no greater than the 36 books of our present Bible. They are simply telling the same truth in a different way. So for those who don't know, the Apocrypha is basically like unofficial stories from the Bible, or like old scripture to believe to have been like removed from the Bible itself. there's a lot of speculation as to the validity of it, but yeah, it's unofficial parts of the Bible, basically. Question: if Jesus was a fictional character created by biblical writers for the purpose of illustrating certain psychological dramas, how do you account for the fact that he and his philosophy are mentioned in the non-religious and non-Christian history of those times? Were not Pontius Pilate and Herod real flesh and blood Roman officials in those days? Neville answers, the story of Jesus is the identical story as that of the Hindu savior, Krishna. They are the same psychological characters. Both were supposed to have been born of virgin mothers. The rulers of the time sought to destroy them when they were children. Both healed the sick, resurrected the dead, taught the gospel of love, and died a martyr's death for mankind. Hindus and Christians alike believe their savior to be God made man. Today, people quote Socrates, yet the only proof that Socrates ever existed is in the works of Plato. It is said that Socrates drank hemlock, but I ask you, who is Socrates? I once quoted a line from Shakespeare, and a lady said to me, but Hamlet said that. Hamlet never said it. Shakespeare wrote the lines and put the words in the mouth of a character he created and named Hamlet. St. Augustine once said, that which is now called the Christian religion existed among the ancients. They began to call Christianity the true religion, yet it never existed. Question: do you use affirmations and denials? Neville answers, let us leave these schools of thought that use affirmations and denials. The best affirmation, and the only effective one, is an assumption which, in and of itself, implies denial of the former state. The best denial is total indifference. Things wither and die through indifference. They are kept alive through attention. You do not deny a thing by saying it does not exist. Rather, you put feeling into it by recognizing it. And what you recognize as true is true for you, be it good, bad, or indifferent. A lot of people ask questions about affirmations and my take on affirmations. And my personal take on affirmations is if it resonates, if it helps you to capture the feeling, then by all means. Neville was not a fan. He said the best affirmation and the only effective one is an assumption which in itself implies denial of the former state. So an assumption that implies things are different for you now. The best denial is total indifference. So he's saying, don't give your attention to something that you don't want. You do not deny a thing by saying it does not exist. Rather, you put feeling into it by recognizing it. So he's saying, by trying to deny or trying to affirm something that you don't believe in that moment is only giving attention to the fact of its absence or something that you don't want. Instead, we want to focus on capturing the feeling of having or being the person you want to be, having your desire, whatever that is. Question: is it possible for one to appear dead and still not be dead? Answer: General Lee was supposed to have been born 2 years after his mother, believed to be dead, was buried alive. Lucky for her, she was not embalmed or buried in the earth, but in a vault where someone heard her cry and released her. 2 years later, Mrs. Lee bore a son who became General Lee. That is part of this country's history. And I don't know if this is 100% true. I have not fact-checked that one, but if that's true, that's wild. Question: how could one who was deprived in his youth become a success in life? Answer: we are creatures of habit, forming patterns of the mind which repeat themselves over and over again. Although habit acts like a compelling law, which drives one to repeat the patterns, it is not a law. For you and I can change the patterns. Many successful men, such as Henry Ford, Rockefeller, and Carnegie were deprived in their youth. Many of the great names in this country came from poor families, yet they left behind them great accomplishments in their political, artistic, and financial world. One evening, a friend of mine attended a meeting for young advertising executives. The speaker of the evening said to those young men, "I have but one thing to say to you tonight, and that is to make yourself big, and you will not fail." Taking an ordinary fishbowl, he filled it with 2 bags, one of English walnuts and the other of small beans. Mixing them with his hand, he began to shake the bowl and said, "This bowl is life. You cannot stop its shaking, as life is a constant pulsing, living rhythm. But watch." And as they watched, the big walnuts came to the top of the bowl as the little beans fell to the bottom. Looking into the bowl, the man asked, "Which one of you is complaining?" Asking why. Then added, "Isn't it strange? The sound is coming from the bowl and not the outside." A bean is complaining that if he had the same environment as a walnut, he too would do big things, but he never had the chance. Then he took a little bean from the bottom of the bowl and placed him on top, saying, "I can move the bean through sheer force, but I cannot stop the bowl of life from shaking." And as he shook the bowl, the little bean once again slid to the bottom. Hearing another voice of complaint, he asked, "What's that I hear? You are saying that I should take one of these big fellows who think he is so big, and put him on the bottom and see what happens to him? You believe he will just be as limited as you because he will be robbed of the opportunity of big things just as you are? Let's see." Then the speaker took one of the big walnuts and pushed him right down to the bottom of the bowl, saying, "I still cannot stop the bowl from shaking." And as the men watched, the big walnut came to the top again. Then the speaker added, "Gentlemen, if you really want to be successful in life, make yourself big." My friend took this message to heart and began to assume he was a successful businessman. Today, he is truly a big man if you judge success by dollars. He now employs over 1,000 people in the city of New York. Each one of you can do what he did. Assume you are what you want to be. Walk in that assumption, and it will harden into fact. So that is today's little bonus section of Neville's 5 lessons, his Q&As. And as hopefully you saw there, a lot of questions that often do come up for us. Just like back then, a lot of people had the same conundrums and curiosities and questions, limitations. So I hope you enjoyed in taking notes. And really, you probably heard over and over, he's very emphasis on one point that he drives home consistently over and over. Assume the end. Don't worry about the means. Don't worry about how it's going to come to be. Walk in your day as though it were in here, and it has to be so. Walk in the assumption, and it must harden into fact. So I hope you guys enjoyed this bonus section here, this little bonus Q&A section. I hope you enjoyed the series. If you have not seen parts 1 through 5, I've got them linked down below, as well as the Neville's 5 lectures if you want to go through and read it yourself, break everything down. But I do hope you enjoyed. I'll be making this into a playlist, and everybody have an amazing rest of your weekend. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Much love, guys.